Greetings, almanac lovers and lovers of all things miscellaneous in nature. You are here at the Book of Days Project. Today is January the 22nd. We are in a hurry to get this done today, so if you will listen closely as I sprint through today's day. Today is the feast day of Saint Vincent, martyr at Valencia in the year 304. Saint Vincent was a Spanish saint martyred under the proconsul Dacian in the 4th century. The recital of his pious serenity and cheerfulness under unheard of tortures is very striking. After having been cruelly broiled over fire, he was put into a dungeon, bound in stocks, and left without provisions. But God, says Butler, sent his angels to comfort him, with whom he sung the praises of his protector. The jailer, observing through the chinks the prison filled with light, and the saints walking and praising God, the jailer was converted upon the spot to the Christian faith, and afterwards baptized. The bones of the martyr were afterwards kept with the utmost veneration, and Butler speaks of some parts of the body as being still preserved in religious houses in France. St. Vincent's Day. It is not surprising that a saint with such a history as that of St. Vincent should have made a deep impression on the popular mind and given rise to superstitious ideas. Here's one of them. The ancient remark on his day was couched in somewhat obscure terms. Vincenti festo si soradiet me moresto. If Vincent's fest the sun does shine, remember this. The matter was a mystery to modern investigators of folklore, till a gentleman residing in Guernsey, looking through some family documents of the 16th century, found a scrap of verse expressed in old provincial French. Here's my go at it. Prends garde un jour Saint Vincent, car si ce jour tu vois est saint, que le soleil soit clair et vieux, nous aurons du vin plus que les That is might at first sight be supposed an intimation to bon vivants, that in that case there would be a greater proportion of wine than of water throughout the year with the sun shining, but a hint to the vine-culturing peasantry that the year would be a dry one and favorable to the vintage if indeed that sun did shine. Take a look outside. Did the sun shine in your part of the world today on St. Vincent's Day? I will talk to you about a bubble, a financial bubble, the South Sea bubble. This day in the year 1720 inaugurated the most monstrous commercial folly of modern times, the famous South Sea bubble. Some things never change. In the year 1711, Harley, Earl of Oxford, with the view of restoring public credit and discharging 10 millions of the floating debt, agreed with the company of merchants that they should take the debt upon themselves for a certain time at the interest of 6%, to provide for which, amounting to £600,000 per annum, the duties upon certain articles were rendered permanent. At the same time was granted the monopoly of trade to the South Seas, and the merchants were incorporated as the South Sea Company. In 1717, the company's stock of 10 million was authorized by Parliament to be increased to 12 million, upon their advancing 2 million to government towards reducing the national debt. The name of the company was thus kept continually before the public, and though their trade with the South American states was not profitable, they continued to flourish as a monetary corporation. Their stock was in high request, and the directors, determined to fly at high game, proposed to the government a scheme for no less an object than paying off the national debt itself. Complicated, but we will push on. The first propounder of the South Seas project was Sir John Blount, who'd been bred a scrivener and was a bold and plausible speculator. The company agreed to take upon themselves the debt, amounting to over £30 million at 5% per annum, secured until 1727, when the whole was to become redeemable at the pleasure of the legislature, and the interest to be reduced to 4%. At this crisis point, an infatuation regarding the South Sea speculation began to take possession of the public mind. The company's stock rose from 130 to 300 and continued to rise while the bill was in progress. Mr. Walpole was almost the only statesman in the House who denounced the absurdity of the measure and warned the country of the evils that must ensue, but his admonition was entirely disregarded. Meanwhile, the South Sea directors and their friends, and especially the chairman of the company, Blount, employed every stratagem to raise the price of the stock. It was rumored that Spain would be, by treaty with England, granted a free trade to all her colonies, and that Spain would grant to England free trade to all of her colonies, and that silver would thus be brought from Potosi until it would be almost as plentiful as iron. Also, that for our cotton and woolen goods, the gold mines of Mexico were to be exhausted. The South Sea Company were to become the richest the world ever saw. And each 100 pound of their stock would produce hundreds per annum to the holder. By this means, the stock was raised to near 400. It then fluctuated and settled at 330 when the bill was passed. No, not without opposition. Exchange Alley was the scat of the gambling fever. It was blocked up every day by crowds, as were Cornhill and Lombard Street with carriages. In the words of the ballads of the day, there is a gulf where thousands fell. There all the bold adventurers came. In narrow sound, though deep as hell, Change Alley is the dreadful name. Then stars and garters did appear among the meaner rabble, to buy and sell, to see and hear the Jews and Gentiles squabble. The greatest ladies thither came, and piled in chariots daily, or pawned their jewels for a sum to venture in the alley. Meanwhile, innumerable bubble companies started up under the very highest patronage. The absurdity of the schemes was palpable. The only policy of the projectors was to raise the shares in the market and then to sell out, leaving the bubble to burst perhaps next morning. Ponzi scheme? One of the schemes was a company for carrying on an undertaking of great advantage, but nobody to know what it is. Each subscriber for £2 deposit to be entitled to £100 per annum. In all these bubbles, persons of both sexes alike engaged, the men meeting the brokers at taverns and coffee houses, and the ladies at the shops of milliners and haberdashers. The alarm greatly increased. The ministers grew more alarmed. The directors were insulted in the streets, and riots were apprehended. Dispatches were sent to the king at Hanover, praying his immediate return. Walpole was implored to exercise his influence with the Bank of England. The South Sea Company was wrecked, and their stocks fell ultimately to 150. Public meetings were now held all over England, praying the vengeance of the legislature upon the South Sea directors through the nation. It was palpable, the cry for vengeance. The king returned, Parliament met, and when Lord Molesworth went so as far to recommend that the people, having no law to punish objectors, should treat them like Roman parasites, tie them in sacks, and throw them into the Thames. There's some old-fashioned justice for you. Thank you for joining us in talk of things that never change, a financial scheme to ruin the public, on January 22nd in the year 1717 in jolly old England. Thank you for joining us at the Book of Days. See you tomorrow.